Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Let's do this. There we go. I should have Andrew on the line. Andrew, can you see my screen? Okay, amazing. Let's just collapse that down. Shouting yes from the kitchen like the glamorous assistant he is. Fabulous, dear, thank you. Okay, so welcome to Tips in 20. Let's just do a quick time check. Top tips and practical strategies on how to thrive in a life altered by your child's disability, diagnosis, or additional needs. So I'm just going to really quickly introduce myself. Some people are new to me and my format. So my name is Charlie Beswick. I'm the mum to Oliver and Harry. Harry is the one you can see on screen here. And I am a teacher of over 16 years. That's not normally relevant, but tonight in particular it is. I'm the best-selling author of Our Altered Life. I am the mentor to mums with an altered life themselves, and I'm an advocate for parent carers in the workplace. I'm a charity founder of More Than a Face, helping people to deal with facial difference and visible difference. And I'm a cheeseaholic and a gin lover, if you didn't already know. So tonight's Tips in 20 is all about behaviour support for your child, but also for you as well. And we're going to be looking at three things. So the types of behaviours that we might experience, the causes of those behaviours, and some tips that will help you manage your child's behaviour and also help you, because I know from experience it can be really, really difficult to either know what to do or to recover from those moments when it's quite challenging. So just going to show you a few images there of life with Harry. In order, going from top left, we've got controlling. So that's one of his behaviours, can be quite controlling at times. And then we've got refusal. So you can see him lying down there in a lift. So obviously we've got people coming in and out. He was refusing to move in a shop and when we were out for a walk. The bottom photograph is a selection of Harry's clothes that he's thrown out of his bathroom window. That can be a variety of things. It can be toys, it can be other objects. So he has phases of throwing things out of the window, whether they're fragile or not, he doesn't care. Middle photograph on the bottom is him stripping off. That was actually at the Hay Children's Hospital, and he needed the toilet and he had to be naked for that. So, or he had a phase of being naked for that, should I say. So that was that phase. And then one of the most difficult phases is the self-directed behaviour, so the self-harming behaviour, which is distressing for absolutely everybody, whether you're watching or whether you're actually Harry. But the reason I mentioned at the beginning that I'm a teacher is because the children that I teach have a variety of different needs. So lots of them are autistic or on the spectrum, the ASD spectrum. Some have fetal alcohol syndrome, some have social, emotional, mental health issues, ADHD, ADD, a wide variety of needs. I have about 19 students per class and I teach 4 classes. And in those classes, I see a variety of behaviours. And actually, the closer I get to these children, the better relationship I have, the more I tend to see these behaviours. So typical examples will be swearing, so sort of foul language aimed at me or at others in the room, running away, trying to sort of escape, damaging property, and a deliberate sort of winding up of other children as well. So those, I'm seeing a variety of behaviours, both as a parent and as an educator. I should also add, though I didn't add any photographs on here, that when we first started in lockdown, Harry ripped a door off in his bedroom and put his head through the wall, which is plasterboard, thankfully. He's also done the same downstairs in our lounge. So I have a variety of behaviours. I don't share a great deal of them, and I certainly don't go into great detail online, but just so that you know that I'm coming from a place of real experience and understanding with this tonight. So what are the causes of behavioural challenges? Well, the first one, first and foremost, is always going to be communication. All forms of behaviour, even the wild ones, even the ones that feel like they are senseless, are your child's way of expressing their needs some way or another. And often that comes from a place of frustration. So that's the first thing to bear in mind, is that if we can get a little bit curious around their behaviour, then we're much more likely to deal with it in a positive manner. And I'll come on to that in a little bit. So another cause could be pain, illness, or health issues. So Harry in particular, I know his behaviour patterns now. And I know that if he is particularly aggressive, sweary, shouting, lots of kicking, it tends to mean that he's constipated. That tends to be his way of communicating to me that he needs extra Movicol that he takes, or warm baths or massages. And that's just come with, he's 18 this year, so that's come with a lot of trial and error and practice. Anxiety and the need for control can be another reason underlying these behaviours. And Yvonne Newborn, if you're not aware of her, she's a perfect person to check out in this topic. She often talks about replacing anxiety with fear as a word, because again, that slightly changes the way in which we perceive the behaviours. It can be in response to changes. So that can be a simple change to a routine, or it can be a significant change. So it could be a transition between settings, between schools, between homes, or it can be anticipation of change. So if children know that change is coming up, then that can be a trigger for behaviour issues. Low self-esteem can often underlie some behaviours as well. When Oliver was diagnosed, assessed for dyslexia, the report came back and said that the woman who'd assessed him had never seen self-esteem so low in a 9-year-old boy than she'd seen with Oliver, which was really sad and hard for me to hear. But it did explain a lot of Oliver's behaviours. He was very, very needy, very clingy, even from a very young age. And he'd say, where are you, Mum? I love you. And I'd say, I love you. And what's the matter? And he'd say, oh, it's okay. I just need to know you're here. And there was a lot of anxiety around me leaving him. And part of that comes from their low levels of self-worth, because they don't feel that they are worth sticking around for, or they're valuable. And that can sound quite high level. I don't claim for a second that that's on a conscious level, but certainly low self-esteem can be a reason why children exhibit behaviours, just to try and mask that low anxiety, that low self-worth and that anxiety, and also to keep some control and predictability as well, because if an environment is predictable, then it's safe. So control can be a huge issue for our children. Puberty is a huge factor. From experience, I can say that with Oliver, he began puberty at 9, very, very young for Oliver. Harry was a little bit older. He was about 12 when he started puberty. But between the ages of, I would say, 12 and 16, certainly 16, we had a real time with Harry for a variety of issues, again, health related. He'd had a urine infection in 2019, and the impact of that left him very reluctant to use the toilet. And we had lots and lots of behavioural issues for 3 years. So there's a lot of overlap. It's really difficult to say there's often just one cause, and I'll come on to that in a second. And sensory overwhelm can be huge for our children. I am great as a teacher in the classroom at filtering noises, because as a parent, I've had to do that for such a long time. So I can teach in environments that are healthily chaotic. It's not that I can't teach, but I can filter that out because I'm used to having to do that at home. So, but our children aren't. They're not always very good at that. So they can feel really overwhelmed at times. And everybody is well aware of the 5 senses: smell, sight, touch, hearing, and taste. But I just want to really briefly mention 3 of the other senses that lots of people don't really know much about. So the first one there is proprioception. So that is knowing where your body is in sort of time and space. Balance is linked to this. I'm reading off my own note because this isn't an area of my expertise, but I know children, and Harry in particular, has dealt with issues around some of these extra senses. So proprioception, it lets us know where our body, parts of our bodies are. So all this pointing to your nose, if you don't know where your nose is, then you can be all over the place, and a child can look quite clumsy. Interoception is more internal. So that's knowing that you feel hungry or thirsty or tired. Some children really struggle with interoception. So they might be hungry, but they don't recognise that, they don't realise that. So again, that can be a real strong underlying cause of their behaviour when they've got needs that aren't being met and they're not even sure themselves what those needs are. And the vestibular system sounds way more fancy than it is. It's literally the inner ear and the workings of the inner ear. And that again controls balance. It controls sort of knowing where your head is when you're moving it. So children that are overstimulated with the vestibular system might hate loud noises, and things like hand dryers and things like that, again, might come across as clumsy because their balance can be affected. But equally, you might have the other end of the spectrum where children will seek out vestibular sort of stimulus. So those are the children that will do lots of spinning, lots of stimming behaviours, because they're trying to regulate their vestibular system. So I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but it is something to be aware of. And if you just Googled those terms, you would find a wealth of activities and behaviours that can support children in those ways as well. So back to the causes. The last one I put there is unknown reasons. And for me, as a mum, that's always been the hardest, the most challenging, is not knowing why our children are behaving the way that they are. And you feel very vulnerable and really helpless, and you can feel frustrated and annoyed and all of the things. You know, there's nothing that you can say you felt that I haven't felt at some time. So absolutely zero judgment here. But sometimes we will never know the underlying causes and the triggers for behaviours. Sometimes our children won't know, or sometimes our children will have an idea and be unable to actually express that to us. So I think sometimes we have to make our peace with the fact that we're not going to get to the underlying cause 100% of the time, and we just have to deal with what we've got and do the best that we can. But I know that makes people feel quite helpless. I know I've definitely felt like that at times. So how can I support my child? So the first thing to mention here is elimination. And by that, I just mean, you know, and I don't mean this to sound patronising, but in the same way that when you've got a baby or an infant, are they fed? Do they need their nappy changing? Do they need all those basic sensory needs? Are they met? Is your child ill? Rule lots and lots of things out. You know, are they ill? Are they unwell? Are they unsettled? Is there a rash somewhere? Is there a mark on them that's annoying them? Anything like that. So the first step is always process of elimination. And that can be quite tiring, and it can feel quite fruitless when you're not finding out the result. But it's really, really important that we can say what the issue isn't, just as much as saying what it is. Being proactive wherever possible. So if you are fortunate enough to be able to take your child out, let's say for a meal, then doing things like ringing ahead and just saying, my child is autistic, they really struggle with waiting. Can we pre-book a table? Can we come in and wait? Can I pre-order the food so that when we get there, we're not waiting for the food for a long time? Little things like that can really reduce that build-up time for your children and the anxiety of being in an environment that might be overstimulating and new and a bit unpredictable and scary. And then things like timers and giving children lots and lots of notice. So Harry's actually flipped that now on us. So if I go to him at bedtime, say we've got to take the iPad off you now, he'll say 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. And he doesn't count down accurately, but he's aware now, because we've done it for so long, that a statement like that, 5 minutes, means his time is winding up, that his iPad is going to be taken off him soon. So there's none of this walking in and taking things off him. There's none of this, right, pack your toys up, we're eating. It's all very planned. And if you can start that as early as possible, so it could be an hour beforehand, half an hour, and then you're giving regular notifications that things are going to change. And again, if you can do that visually, so with a little timer or a stop clock, anything like that that your child can see, will really help them. Because coming on to visuals, that can be one of the ways in which our children are supported the most. We are all visual learners. You know, there's a reason why symbols are used rather than lots of writing universally, and that's because we can all understand those. So symbols take a lot of the thinking and a lot of the pressure out of conversations. So visuals, like a visual timetable, is really good. Images on a bit of Velcro. When Harry was first learning to talk, we would have photographs, actual photographs, rather than clip art images. So I would take photographs of Harry's actual beaker and Harry's actual nappy, and we just had things Velcroed all around the lower cupboards of the kitchen, and he would take that off and hand it to us, and then we would repeat it back to him and just encourage that conversation. But it really removed that barrier of frustration, because he couldn't tell us what he needed. He was able to show us, or at least point, and we could guess. So it was almost us meeting him halfway. So I cannot emphasize how important visuals are. And I think people often think that's just a reward chart, and that will work for some children. For children on the spectrum, not so much, or, not for long. And that's another really important thing to say, is that what works for one child isn't always going to work for the next. And what works for your child today might not work for them in 2 or 3 weeks. So that's something else. It's a tough reality when we've battled to get some progress. But visuals are a really, really powerful way of reinforcing a message and helping our children to communicate without the need of language. I do apologise, I've got a bit of a cold coming in, a very sore throat today. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit nasally. The next point here is to be aware of your own language, your tone, the way you are saying things, as much as what you are saying. One of the words that can trigger a lot of children, particularly my students at school, but I know as a parent, is no. Because sometimes, and again, this is linked to low self-esteem, if children are hearing no, sometimes it's very difficult for them to separate you saying no to the activity that they want and no to them as a person. So it can feel a bit like rejection. It can feel like you're pushing them away as a person if they struggle to differentiate between what they want, what they need, and who they are as a person. So instead of saying no, it might be, so for example, when Harry's wanted toys, and if you follow me on social media, you will see I'm not always successful in this, but sometimes I'll come out with 2 toys instead of the 7 that he wanted. So we have to take the wins. But it might be, let's take a photograph and we'll buy it next time, or we'll put it on the list. So it's not, no, you can't have that, or no, you can't eat that, or no, you can't go there, but it's okay, let's do that, but not now. So I hope you can hear that the subtle difference in that you're not saying, no, you're not having that, which means they can sometimes internalize that as meaning, no, you're not worthy, or you're not worth it, or, all of those sort of complex emotions, which can be very triggering for anybody at the best of times, but they're hearing it more situationally, and it actually helps them to differentiate between them and what their needs are and their external needs. Observe and record, record, record. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to keep diaries, to look to maintain records. So particularly around Harry's toileting, we had to keep records, and sleep diaries. Oh my goodness, I had them coming out of my ears. And at the time, it felt laborious. It felt really tedious. It felt very pointless. But actually, when you look back over 2 or 3 weeks, you can identify patterns. You do see trends, and that does help you to put in support at the right time, because timing is crucial. We want to put the most effort we can into proactive, preventative support, so that we're not putting all our time, attention, and effort into mopping up, because that's not good for us. It's not good for our children. So the only way we're going to get that is by observing and recording. So yes, it can be very boring. Yes, it can be very tedious. And no, it doesn't happen overnight. None of these things are quick overnight wins, unfortunately. There is no magic wand. They all require time, patience, resilience. And it is hard. And I'm not going to lie and say, yeah, it's really easy. It isn't. But it's really necessary. And once you start coming out the other side of behaviour issues, then you feel the rewards then. So redirect rather than restrain or stopping. So behaviours such as, and again, I'm just using Harry as an example, when he used to be on the toilet, he would smack himself quite violently and quite often. And that was just before he even had a wee. It didn't have to be anything, like sort of a bowel movement. And for a while, I would stop him. I would hold his hands, because it upset me to see him hitting himself. And no parent wants to see their child doing that. But what I recognised was that was his way of coping, of balancing the inner turmoil of toileting with the outer expression. And so I would just put my hands over his forehead and let him smack my hands instead. So I wasn't stopping his expression, but what I was doing was just protecting himself a little bit and just holding my hands away. Another thing that he used to do is a lot of eating things in the bathroom. So when he was on the toilet, waiting to use the toilet, he would eat anything. So soap, toilet brushes, toothbrushes, toothpaste, toilet roll, any of those things. So his bathroom here is empty of most things now, as it is at his dad's house, and school had to remove everything from the toilet. But again, what I did was I bought him teething toys. So he calls them bite. So if he now goes to the toilet and he's feeling agitated, he'll say, bite, please. So I'll just pass him one of his teething toys and he'll bite down on that. The other behaviour that he does constantly is bouncing. So he has recently broken his divan bed, so I've had to rebuild the base of that. And he will bounce on sofas and things like that until they're flat. So we've bought an enormous space hopper. It's like an adult sized giant space hopper. We've also got a rocking chair. And so we'll redirect him. So it's not about stopping the behaviours, because actually in many ways they soothe Harry. They help him. They might help your child. But it's about redirecting it in a way that means it's not dangerous to them or anybody else. And that actually we can use that in a positive way. So he's still burning his energy up. He's still communicating his needs. He's still getting that frustration out, but he's just doing it in a safer way. And then teaching the calm moments and comforting the tough. So when we do have those calm times, so for example, when Harry's getting dressed, if he's struck, and I have to help him still with all of his personal needs, but if I am getting him dressed and he's stuck, or I can see he's getting a bit frustrated, but it's not quite at the point where we're going to have behavioural problems, I'll say, does Harry need help? Harry says, help, please. So Harry will say, help, please, and then I'll help him straight away. So in those moments, I'm teaching before there's any escalation, because by the time our children are anxious, their sympathetic nervous system is already in fight or flight, and it's really difficult to be able to communicate with them then, because we often talk about we've lost them. You know, sometimes children will say there's a red mist and they just can't hear sense. So at that time, they need comfort, they need reassurance, they need compassion. That isn't the time for chastising them, for teaching them. It's always afterwards. And just coming back to the language actually on that one, information carrying words are really important when children are in meltdown. So don't try and have big long conversations with them. Just use one or two very simple words, and just make sure that they're safe. So yeah, I think that's a really sort of important one, is that we're teaching in those calm moments, using the language, associating the right behaviours. And Harry will sometimes say help or mummy, 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 and he will show me what he wants, because he knows that I will help him before it gets to the stage where he's distressed. But when he's distressed, then it's all about damage limitation, getting in there, making sure that he's not hurting himself or anybody else, and then really coming from a place of comfort. And it's hard, because sometimes if your child is having one of these moments where they're being particularly verbally abusive, and I see this a lot with the mums that I mentor, you know, they're called some awful names by children, and it's really soul crushing. It's really, really hard. And yes, our children are only saying this because they love us. Yes, we are their closest person, but in that moment, it doesn't always help us when we're being called awful names. So it is about being compassionate in that moment, taking a little bit of time, giving them processing time. Our children can't always process 2 or 3 things one after another. So if you're saying, come on, get ready, put your shoes on, get your bag, get your coat, that can be way too much. That can trigger a child straight away. Oliver's particular type of dyslexia is processing dyslexia. So I know I can only say one thing at a time for him, sometimes multiple repetitions, and give him a little bit of space for him to take that in. So there is power in the pause. So it might be something like you would say, right, we need to get your shoes on now. Time for your shoes on. So you can hear that deliberate pause, just so that they've got the time to process it. So language is so, so critical. But again, once they're in fight and flight and they're distressed, that goes out of the window. So teaching the calm moments with the hope that we can build on those and comfort in the tough ones. And how can I support myself? So I mentioned about supporting you as well as the child. So working on your own mindset is really important. You are not to blame. It is not your fault. The behaviours that your child is displaying is going to be a combination of factors, none of which is going to be the fact that you are a rubbish parent. So I know that's very difficult to believe from me. But I assure you that that's not the case. And when we're desperate for an answer or a reason, often we turn that internally because it's easier and quicker to blame ourselves. Our brains can't cope with not having an explanation. So often we blame ourselves. Kindness and compassion to yourself as well as your child. So I've just talked about calm in the chaotic moments and compassion and kindness. But when our child's had a meltdown, or indeed when we've lost our temper and maybe said or done things that we regret, because we're only human, it's really important that we are kind and compassionate to ourselves as well. And we give ourselves time, because everybody goes into that fight or flight stage when our child are in meltdown or in distress. So that will be you, it will be their siblings, it might be your partner, your family, anybody that's around. All of your anxiety levels and your cortisol levels will be high. So it's about just taking time, cancel plans if you've got them in the afternoon or later on, having a cup of tea, turning things off, unplugging from social media, and just having that grounding time is massively, massively important for yourself. Focusing on your family and your needs rather than other people's opinions. You are going to have to parent your child differently to a lot of other people. And for some people, that will look like lazy parenting. For some people, that will look like inappropriate parenting, or I'm sure if you've not heard it, you can imagine what people would say. That's their opinion, and it comes often from a place of not knowing and a lack of understanding rather than malice. So again, easier said than done, I know, but your focus has to be on managing the situation that you've got, your child's behaviours, your happiness as a unit. So focusing on you rather than the opinions of other people, because they're going to have opinions, helpful or otherwise. But really important that you're focusing on you. Making time for yourself. We are the very bottom of the list as parents, I know that. But when we are dealing with behaviours constantly, so Harry's lack of sleep, at one time I was awake with him 13 times a night, every night, putting him back into bed. I couldn't work full time. I had to then leave work because I couldn't function. Sleep deprivation, was used as a form of torture. When people say I'm sleep deprived, but they're rocking up and they're looking great and they're going to work, it's very different than being genuinely sleep deprived when it kind of hangs on you like a fog and you're really quite a danger to drive and things like that. So, it is really important that you're making time for yourself and recuperating, because if you're not feeling your best, then you can't give your best. And then we get into a cycle of you being short-tempered, which just might trigger the child, and so on and so on. So taking care of yourself is really important. Acceptance versus acknowledgement is something I talk about quite a lot, more so in the realm of emotions, I have to say, but it is valid here. So I am never going to accept that I'm going to leave Harry vulnerable when I die. I do acknowledge it, and that allows me to put plans in place. But lots of people will say, well, you just have to accept this is the behaviour. You just have to accept that they've got autism, this is how they behave. You're just going to have to accept that they've got fetal alcohol syndrome and this is a symptom. I think there's a difference. Sometimes I wrestle with accepting, because to me that means that I'm at peace with that. And I'm not at peace with everything in my life, but I can accept it. And from a place of acceptance, I can then go on to make plans and make a positive sort of, positive difference. And that gets me out of victim mindset, because if we can't accept things and we can't acknowledge it, then we're trapped in that woe is me state, which we all find ourselves in at times. I've certainly been guilty of that from time to time, but it's really important that we move out of that, because that doesn't serve anybody. And make sure that you're talking to other people who understand and who truly get it as well. Which brings me on to the Send Gin and Cheese membership. So this, I'm just going to mention really briefly, is called More Than a Mum. It's the empowerment pathway. And on the screen there's a list of reasons why this membership would be suitable for you. So if you don't feel present in the moment with your child and family because you're constantly worried about the future, this membership is for you. Equally, if you're struggling to let go of the life you did expect so that you can enjoy life now, if you feel distant from family and friends who don't understand what's going on, that can be really challenging at times. If you feel consumed by the sadness of comparing your life with others, again, really difficult. If you feel intimidated and find it hard to speak with professionals, or you feel guilty a lot of the time because you can't meet everyone's needs all of the time. The membership includes live sessions with me to develop your emotions, your advocacy, and time for yourself and others. So we've got some pathways and we skill you up in all of those ways. So some mindset transformation sessions, which will be amazing. Live group mentoring calls every month. So 2 calls every month with me. Guest experts coming in to talk about issues that are really relevant and important to you right now. So that could be toileting, sleep, speech and language, behaviour. And rather than paying 80, 90, 30, sort of a couple of £100 for sessions with these experts, you'll be able to access them included in the membership, which at its most, and you won't be paying this price, will be £12.99. Ongoing access to all the sessions, the recordings, and any future membership developments, and an amazing community of mums. If you're not already in the free Send Gin and Cheese Facebook, it's a gorgeous community. So we will emulate that in the membership. We'll be going into a little bit more detail, a bit more depth about our needs, and really working through that together.
Buddy.
And so you will be able to, so this is just, I'm just going to whiz through these, manage your worries so that you can fully enjoy the time you spend with your family and not look back at regrets in the future, because that's what I did. I don't want anybody to get 7 or 8 years in and then really realise that they could have done this so much sooner, which is the whole reason for the membership. Get those good people around you. Know what to ask for in a setting and how to manage transitions. So when that's home to nursery, nursery to school, school to college, college to the big wide world, scary. I've got your back. We can do that together. That's absolutely fine. Discussing things with professionals really calmly and really assertively so that you are included in the decisions, because a lot of the time we feel like life's happening at us or to us. And so during the membership, we're going to, again, skill you up so that you are able to feel really proactive in life and have a positive influence in your child's future. And reconnect to the adult you were before you became a mum. Laugh without guilt and make space for yourself so that you don't feel resentful of life and have some fun and purpose outside of being a mum. So that is the membership. Now, due to technical issues with my website, the wait list should have closed by now, but it's not going to close until Saturday, this Saturday. So I will send the waitlist link out in the email. So do look out for that. In fact, once the recording stopped, I might share it in the box. So if you just hang on 2 seconds. The waitlist closes on Saturday, the 13th of May. So if you are watching this on replay and a recording after that date, if you go to sendginandcheese.org, the full information will be there. But if you join the waitlist, then you are going to get an amazing founding members deal. Which I won't be repeating because I'm only going to get a founding member crew once. So that's going to be amazing. And information on that is going to go out on Sunday. So I'm going to stop the share now, stop the recording. And if anybody has any questions, then I'm more than happy to answer them if that's specific to yourself. And I will just stop the recording now.